Paris, the City of Light. This is Daniel Vallis from InformedChristians.com, a ministry devoted to discerning current events from a Christian perspective. Again, a quick shout out and thanks to all those who send in tips and ideas and things you find in the news, and especially thank you to those who pray for me in this ministry. It means so much. 2 Timothy 2:6 says, "The husbandman that laboreth must be first partaker of the fruits." Those who help and support this ministry through information, cards, letters, and prayer, they will have a part in the fruit and rewards of what is accomplished through this ministry. Now I encourage you to be a part of this ministry. Help hold the ropes. Pray for us. I need strength. I need wisdom. I need liberty. Pray for this ministry. Pray that those who are seeking for truth will come across this information and that they can apply it to their lives to live in righteousness. This is only a watch, not a prediction. We are looking at what has already happened. I don't know what's going to happen tomorrow or anytime soon, but it's not looking good, I will say that. Just looking at the different events that we've seen just within the past 2 weeks, so much has happened. And especially the events in Paris. But other things have happened pointing to this time, and we've been looking at it because Satan is readying his disciples for something big that's coming down the pipe, apparently. And it looks like it is already starting to unfold. Just lately, we've been talking about the gods of Egypt, the fallen angels, Osiris, Apollyon. We talked a lot about concepts and subjects that a lot of people think are just mumbo-jumbo. And they say, well, if they believe that, they're crazy. But the subject of the fallen angels and the Egyptian gods and the Greek gods and all that, that is something that the enemy takes very seriously because they know it is real. It is not mumbo-jumbo or just made-up fictitious stuff that they decided to follow. There is a basis in reality of it, and the Bible even tells us so. Revelation 9:11. "And they had a king over them, which is the angel of the bottomless pit, whose name in the Hebrew tongue is Abaddon, but in the Greek tongue hath his name Apollyon." The Bible tells us that Abaddon is a very real angel, but has different names in different traditions and cultures. The Hebrews know him as Abaddon. The Greeks know him as Apollyon. Apollyon is what the ancient Greeks called Apollo, the Greek sun god. But then the Bible goes on to say in that chapter that this one angel, Apollyon, leads an army of demons that have the heads of men, the bodies of horses, and hair like women. In Greek mythology, these were known as centaurs. And furthermore, in Greek mythology, Apollo is said to be the father of Centaurus, the father of the centaurs. There is a very real component to what we've been studying. The fallen angels, Apollyon, that's very much real. And Satan's disciples are looking forward to seeing him. We're watching their movements as they get ready for him. We know the hour is very late, but the subjects that we are covering is not mumbo-jumbo or just made-up fable stories. It is real. Before we get into our main subject, I just want to recap over just a few quick events that happened over the past few days before we dive on in. The other day we covered Spectre, came out on I believe the 6th, the latest James Bond movie featuring the Days of the Dead and big reference to the ghosts on the cover, and then of course even the name Spectre about ghosts from the past and all that. But then I found out today that the main villain has a very interesting symbolism in him too. In the movie the figure goes by the name Oberhauser, who you find out staged his own death and then adopted the name Ernest Stavro Blofeld before going on to form Spectre. But Blofeld is the name of a previous James Bond villain whose main characteristic was an injury to one eye. And where have we seen that lately? A lot of references over the past 2 weeks to Apollyon, the one-eyed. Very, very interesting. Even more layers of symbolism turn up. On the 12th, NASA released some more photos of Pluto, but they put it in false color in order to highlight the many subtle color differences between Pluto's distinct regions, so they say. But it's interesting, Pluto is a reference to the underworld in mythology, and it's interesting that they're portraying it in a false color light. Also a subtle play on the rainbow too as well, which we've talked about before. Then, of course, yesterday, Friday the 13th, was the events in Paris. With all those events, the question comes up and people asked, and I wondered to myself, is there anything that we can find connected in the events that have happened over the past few days and or on the cover that point toward this? We're going to be covering a lot of material that will look at some of those concepts pointing toward it, but I want to say that the symbolism on the cover appears not to be predictive, but cues of what you would see almost in hindsight. You would see it as it happens and be able to see that it's pointing to the time frame. When you see those events that are pointed to on the cover, you know you're in the right time frame. So I would say they're not predictive, but they're more indicative to confirm a time period and also what they expect to happen in that time period to a degree too, but I wouldn't say that it's predictive. So let's examine some of it today. When we look at the cover, we find that the president of France is right behind Obama, but it shows only his head. There's not much to him at all. So that automatically cuts down a lot of speculation. There's not much to him. So are there any other references to France on the cover? Well, there is. Right above Putin, we see Napoleon Bonaparte waving. What is so odd about that? Well, if you're familiar with Napoleon Bonaparte, you never see him waving. And in fact, if you look at the pictures on the cover, there's almost nobody else is waving except for Obama and Modi and the policeman. So the fact that Napoleon is waving when nobody else is hardly draws attention to him. Why is he waving? What's so special about him waving? Well, if you do a quick search on Napoleon, you'll quickly find out that he's almost always, unless he's pointing to something, he's almost always has his hand inside his vest and the coat. That's what he's most known for, is having that particular pose. And of course, the hidden hand is a Masonic sign. It's the sign of the Master of the Second Veil. The hidden hand lets the other initiates know that the individual depicted is part of this secret brotherhood and that his actions were inspired by the Masonic philosophy and belief. What makes it so interesting is the hidden hand, the hand that executes the actions, is hidden. You can't see it. That is what is symbolic. It's the hidden hand that you have to watch out for. There's other major characters in geopolitics right now who also display this sign very subtly sometimes. So back to Napoleon Bonaparte. When we see that almost all the time he has his hand hidden, and that's very characteristic of him, when it's highlighted on the cover that he's showing a hand, that brings our attention to the hand, not the person. What this is a symbol and a reference to the hidden hand, those who manipulate governments and events behind the scenes that we will never know about. So right away on the cover, right toward the front near the title too, as you're reading down the cover, it makes it clear there's going to be a hidden hand involved in a lot of the symbolism that goes on behind the scenes that you will never know. You will see the outward side of it. And that's what a lot of the patterns and symbols on the cover are referencing, the outward side, but you won't see how it happens or what has been manipulating it. There's also another reference to the hidden hand too as well. In front of Putin is a crapo dust. Now this is interesting because it refers to a slang word of crop dusting. What it refers to is when you are in a crowd and you pass gas and you pretend like it wasn't you and people try to wonder who it was. So actions are done but you don't know who did it. It's a slang reference to it, a subtle way of referring to it. So there's two symbols on this cover that are pointing to hidden hand actions. And it's also interesting that to reinforce that symbolism, it's right in front of Putin, Russia, who is definitely known right now in news and current events with Gazprom and natural gas, those events, so that we know we can interpret it that way. So again, two symbols of hidden hand action who are going to be working toward the goals of Apollyon that we've been looking at. But there's another interesting symbol on the cover as well. This model wearing a hat. This very unique headdress brings attention to itself. When we do a little bit of investigating, we find it was created for the British luxury fashion house Alexander McQueen by Philip Tracy and Sean Liang. It's constructed of silver with Swarovski gemstones, mallard feathers with 7 eggs, and it's made to resemble a thrasher bird nest. Alexander McQueen was a very interesting person. He served the elite in British society. He was awarded the title British Designer of the Year 4 times between 1996 and 2003. You see a lot of his designs on Princess Kate and many other major stars and people of prominence. This guy had inside connections. He knew people. He was very well recognized too as well. This particular headdress was called the Bird's Nest Headdress and was made for his collection Widows of Culloden for fall 2006. It is here at this show that the model Kate Moss appeared as an ethereal apparition, a hologram floating inside a glass pyramid as the soundtrack to Schindler's List played in the background. The designer employed an old parlor trick called Pepper's Ghost to conjure Moss's own ghostly beauty for the finale. an illusion used in early cinema. This technique simply projects an image onto glass. The sequence was produced by Bailey Walsh and art directed by McQueen, and was inspired by the Lumiere brothers' film Dance Serpentine, The Serpentine Dance, from 1896. Very interesting, and this headpiece is directly linked to this show. It's interesting if you're familiar with Madonna's halftime show. Her intricate headdress was also made by Milliner to the stars, and for the Alexander McQueen, Philip Tracy. We have a whole video on the Hoover Dam symbolism from this too as well. But McQueen was a very disturbed individual, but he had insider knowledge to the power of brainwashing and trauma-based mind control. And he used a lot of those references in his designs, and he died under mysterious suicide circumstances. But his last and unfinished 2010 collection was called Plato's Atlantis. This last collection is what he is known for. So when you see that headdress on the cover, this automatically comes to mind with those who are familiar with him. Plato's Atlantis. It was considered to be his greatest achievement. It was the last fully realized collection the designer presented before his death in February 2010. McQueen said it was inspired by Charles Darwin's On the Origin of Species. It presented a narrative that centered not on the evolution of humankind, but its de-evolution. In Plato's Atlantis, the sublime of nature was paralleled and supplanted by that of technology, the extreme space-time compressions produced by the Internet. And who invented the Internet? CERN. We've talked a lot about the pillars of Atlantis, going through the pillars. A lot of the pillar symbology that's been coming up in these past 2 weeks too. If you have not yet, see our video, Time CERN in the Bible, where we talk a lot about these concepts, time and back to the future, time and Tomorrowland, where we talk a lot about Atlantis too as well. It is interesting, in the movie Spectre, that came out just a few days ago, the villain calls Bond by a nickname Cuckoo, which is the bird that lays its eggs in other birds' nests and then pushes them out when it hatches. So the headdress embodies rich symbolism and evokes ghosts, pyramids, projections, illuminations, rebellion, supplanting, and Atlantis. That is what the Hidden Hand will be working on this year, apparently, bringing all that symbolism to birth and fruition. So let us now look at the events surrounding Paris and see if we can find some fingerprints from the Hidden Hand. We won't find many. Of course, in the events there are mass shootings, bombs, supposedly a lot of people died. So it definitely made the news. One thing that is interesting is one of the alleged attacks happened near the Louvre. Now, going back to the cover, Leonardo da Vinci's La Belle Ferione, however you pronounce that, that painting is currently located in the Louvre in Paris. So that caught my attention right away when one of the alleged attacks said it happened near the Louvre. But it's also interesting that 3 different shootings took place in Paris's 10th and 11th administrative districts. So pulling out the number 11. Now, of course, this happened on Friday the 13th, which also has anniversary significance, that particular combination of Friday the 13th, because it's also the particular day that the Templar Order, which is very pro-Illuminati, was disbanded, tortured, and burned at the stake. So this does have some significance to the Illuminati, the date. And some people have suggested that the numbers that were on the arrows could be rearranged to make this date, but depending on how your particular region does it, here in America we do month, day, year. Over in Europe it's day, month, year. Does the number 13 have significance? It does have significance, and it comes from the Bible, Genesis 14:4. 12 years they served at Chedorlaomer, and in the 13th year they rebelled. And in the Bible, usually whenever the first subject appears in the Bible, it sets the tone for how that instance of that subject is going to be understood in the rest of the Bible. And so 13 is always associated with rebellion. Rebellion. And when we look at the arrows on the cover, we find the ingredients to these numbers, 1s, 3s, and 5s. That could give us the 11, 13, 15. But I don't see a strong key that tells us that we can align, that we can come to that conclusion, because they could be arranged another way. And again, I don't think the cover is predictive. I think it's more for confirmation of when you do see events happen that points to them. Arrows are very similar to missiles, and some people wonder, do these represent nuclear missiles? Often are broken arrow attacks. Missing nuclear weapons are called broken arrows. And some people have pointed out that the 11-5 arrow shadow appears to be broken, but I don't think that it is, because you can see it continue right on after them. The shadow is still there. It doesn't appear broken. So I don't see any strong thing we can pull from that concretely. I'm open to ideas, but I don't see anything concrete or weighty that we can really rest on there. But there is definite reference to ISIS, and we already talked a lot in some of the previous videos about ISIS and the bug splat. But it was interesting in this event. One of the things that caught our attention was the use of Kalashnikovs and AK-47s and a restaurant name too. So I think there is some play on that and calling people's attention to that. And again, these patterns I think will have multiple use when we see prominent, distinct, deliberate use in the media. Then we have a clear case. But it's interesting, the news says terror casts shadow over City of Light. Paris is the City of Light. And what have we been looking at lately? We've been looking at how right now we're in Diwali, the Festival of Light. And right now we're also in the International Year of Light. So that automatically should catch our attention. Then we've seen trailers recently about the heart. And then the same day as the attack, a movie called 33, with heavy symbolism there, came out, produced by Phoenix Pictures. And that was all about the heart too as well. So 33 on the 13th. What connection is here? Well, the France phone code is 33. The Paris area code is 1. The Paris dial code is 331. For example, the U.S. Embassy there in Paris, their phone number is 33-143-12-22-22. 33. The same day 33 came out on the 13th. And with the ones, you can also get 13 too. But 33 and 13, very, very suspicious. And we've also seen before with ISIS, with the bug splat, meeting the requirements and meeting the symbolism. ISIS is controlled by the hidden hand just as well as these other events too. Do not assume they are independent or acting on their own. They are a controlled pawn, just like everything else on the chessboard. All the world is a stage. It is all staged. It is all theater. But the hidden hand controls everything behind the scenes, so the general populace, minions, and sheeple don't catch wind of it and throw a monkey wrench into things. Because we would be really ticked if we found out. So that's why it's kept so quiet. Because as long as they keep you in the dark, they can do what they want to do. Now, one event that drew a lot of attention was at the Bataclan Concert Hall Auditorium on the Boulevard Voltaire in the east of Paris. And on Friday night, it was playing host to a sold-out crowd there to watch the band Eagles of Death Metal on Friday night when the building was stormed by gunmen who took hostages and killed them. And supposedly at least 118 people have been reported dead at this venue alone. Eagles of Death Metal. Wow. I looked on their website and there was not much that I could post here. Let me just put it that way. Very disturbing material that they produced. But the lightning bolt, clear reference to Lucifer, and that's often used in heavy metal, and it's been used for a long, long time as a reference to Lucifer. So this is very suspicious as well. Of course, on the news, after the Paris attacks, artists share messages of peace, and we've seen all over the world, just within hours after this, multiple buildings and landmarks around the world lighting up in the French colors, red, white, and blue. And does this remind you of anything else that we've seen lately? We've seen a lot of symbolism between the red and the blue, which is used a lot in the occult to reference a variety of things, really. But fire and ice, the duality, the two pillars, a variety of things. So it is interesting that we're seeing those two colors portrayed all over the place all of a sudden in light projections, too. And it's also interesting, they said that the Eiffel Tower will go dark Saturday night to honor those who died in Paris attacks. So it's bringing attention to the absence of light, actually taking the tower and delighting it, which by doing that brings focus and attention to the lack of light, the main subject being light. I thought it was interesting, CNN, the first picture that they showed so prominently though, was the Brandenburg Gate in Berlin, Germany. And what do you see up there on top of the gate? Chariot of the gods, the god Apollo and his sun chariot as he rides across the sky, and harkening back to Greek mythology again, which was a direct reference to the fallen angels, Apollyon. And where else did we see this in the major news within the past week? They had a whole story about Trump's tower bringing focus to Apollo leading his chariot in one painting and then smeared all over the ceiling too. Apollo, Lucifer, the torchbearer. This is not coincidence. These are connected. The light bearer, the sun god Apollyon, Lucifer, is about to ride onto the scene. On top of these Brandenburg Gate is called a quadriga. It's a car or chariot drawn by 4 horses abreast. It was raced in ancient Olympic games and other contests. It is represented in profile as a chariot of gods and heroes on Greek vases and in bas relief. The quadriga was adopted in ancient Roman chariot racing. Quadrigas were emblems of triumph. Victory and fame were often depicted as the triumphant women driving it. In classical mythology, the quadriga is the chariot of the gods. Apollo was depicted driving his quadriga across the heavens, delivering daylight and dispersing the night. So that one is over the Brandenburg Gate in Berlin, but it also calls to mind the quadriga that is in Paris. And it is interesting on this quadriga that there are entwined serpents, just like the caduceus hearkening to Mercury, the chariot of Apollo. And where is this quadriga located? Right across from the Napoleon courtyard at the Louvre, where there is another illuminated glass pyramid. That instantly brings to mind the glass pyramid from Plato's Atlantis. And of course, it then brings to mind the illuminated pyramid, an eye of Horus that is on the back of the American dollar bill. The illumined one, Lucifer, the hidden hand. Consider this for a moment. The people who put this on American currency, they control the currency, the government, and the events in the world, not your government. Paris, the city of light. Diwali, the festival of lights. The International Year of Light. 33, 13, and the Eagles of Death medal. Well, that reminds us of the double-headed eagle of Lagash, the phoenix of the Freemason. The double-headed eagle is probably the most easily recognizable Masonic symbol in the world, even more important than the symbol and compass rule. They look like 2 eagles and are called eagles, but they are not. They are the phoenix bird of ancient Egypt. In Egypt, the Brotherhood was known as the Mystery Schools, and it's what the Bible references as the mystery of iniquity. But you'll notice a similar theme going on here with the sun god, the illumined one, the eye of Horus, Lucifer. We've talked a lot about the 2 pillars, Osiris, and what the obelisk represents. And that's why the Masonic aprons cover the genitals, because it's a reference to the generative principle. The lower initiates are told that it refers to geometry, but later on they find out that that's just a cover story. But a lot of symbolism in there. Do you recognize this guy? Why is he wearing an apron with a G on it? He's a minion. He's controlled. And they're also produced by Illumination Entertainment. The Pied Piper controls Hollywood. The Serpent controls Hollywood. And they even tell you that straight up on the movie poster. And it is interesting in this particular movie, Despicable Me, that they even make reference to the Statue of Liberty and the Eiffel Tower. And we'll see those here more in a second. Those who are involved in Freemasonry, the Masons and all that, they are the minions. Most of them don't even know what they're involved with. But like the poster says, when the world needs a hero, they call it a villain. It's a parable. Friday the 13th. 13, why is that so significant? The number of rebellion. Looking back on the dollar bill, we find 13 illuminated stars, which reference fallen angels, by the way, which supposedly reference 13 colonies. There are 13 letters in the motto E Pluribus Unum, one of many. There are 13 arrows. There are 13 leaves. There are 13 berries. There's a phoenix, not an eagle. 13, the number of rebellion, of the fallen stars. Guess which side of your dollar bill is green? The one with Lucifer. There's 13 layers of bricks, 13 original colonies. 1776, the date the Illuminati was formed. The illumined eye is the great architect Lucifer. The official translation of the Latin phrase is, "He has favored our undertaking, a new order of the ages." It is interesting when you look at it, the ligature OE is not the letters O and E, it is a ligature, OE. Cooptus with the ligature literally means children of Dan. So the phrase actually says he granted a new order of the ages to the children of Dan. The tribe of Dan was one of the 12 tribes of Israel, the one that went into apostasy, and they followed after the pagan idols, which were based on the fallen angels. Satan has his disciples who are following him and his fallen angels. Shortly after the shooting events in Paris, this story came out. A pianist plays Imagine outside the besieged Paris concert venue. Now, this concert venue was where the Eagles of Death metal were playing, supposedly. So he came out and played John Lennon's world peace anthem, Imagine. Well, what do the lyrics of that song say? Immediately, it should catch our attention that the very first line says, Imagine there's no heaven. It's easy if you tried. No hell below us. Above us only sky. Imagine all the people living for today. And no religion, too. And the world will live as one. Very suspicious that this song is now being linked to this event. John Lennon, of course, is the one who popularized and really pushed during the 60s the idea of imagine, peace, and the peace symbol, the broken cross. An occult symbol, by the way. And even by looking at his memorial in New York, it's a giant sun symbol with all the sun rays. And that's basically what a swastika and the black-wheeled sun is. They're referencing the sun god, the sun wheel. And even at the Hoover Dam, they have stylized sun wheels there too as well. And we talked about that in our video, the Hoover Dam signal. Imagine. Why is this being linked? Because it's part of bringing in the new Atlantis, Satan's new Atlantis, his new golden age. Imagine. What does that remind us of? It reminds us of Disney's latest movie, Tomorrowland, where their theme of this new Atlantis was imagination is more important than knowledge. Imagination. What does the Bible say about the Tower of Babel? Genesis 11:5-6. And the Lord came down to see the city and the tower which the children of men builded. And the Lord said, Behold, the people is one, and they have all one language. And this they begin to do, and now nothing will be restrained from them, which they have imagined to do. Do you remember the state that mankind was in right before the flood came? And the reason for the flood was because the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and every imagination of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. And here he was at the Tower of Babel, working to do the same thing again. The imagination of the thoughts of his heart. He wanted to imagine a world without God. Read our article, Time and Tomorrowland, for more on that subject of imagination, why that's being pressed. Imagination and rebellion against God. 13. That's what the Tower of Babel all circulated about. It was 13. It was rebellion. Imagination of their heart was only evil continually because they wanted to build a new Atlantis. They wanted to build a golden age without God. That's what's about to come onto the scene again, though. It is interesting in the Tomorrowland promotional material, they specifically push that Eiffel played part of this with its Eiffel Tower and involvement in the Statue of Liberty, too, as well. The Statue of Liberty. Liberty Enlightening the World is what it's also known as, is a colossal sculpture on Liberty Island in the middle of New York Harbor in Manhattan, New York City. The statue was designed by Frederick August Bartholdi and dedicated in 1886. The statue is of a robed female figure representing Libertas, the Roman goddess of freedom, who bears a torch and a tabula ansata, a tablet evoking the law, upon which is inscribed the date July 4th, 1776. A broken chain lies at her feet. And that is the public story. But the Statue of Liberty was built in Paris, the City of Lights. So you're building a torch-bearing figure in the City of Lights. Interesting. It is made in collaboration with the French engineer Gustave Eiffel, who was responsible for its frame. Eiffel would undertake the construction of the Eiffel Tower shortly after the completion of his work on the Statue of Liberty. The same man worked on both. Because it was built in Paris in collaboration with Eiffel, there is a miniature Statue of Liberty not too far from the Eiffel Tower in Paris. In 1867, Bartholdi initially wanted to build a colossal statue at the northern entrance to the Suez Canal in Egypt, which was then nearing completion. He proposed that it could be called Progress, or Egypt Carrying the Light to Asia, but nothing came of that idea though. The Statue of Liberty is really the Babylonian harlot goddess Ishtar, the goddess of fertility, prostitution, homosexuality, and lesbianism. Yes, this is a Statue of Liberty, but it's a heathen concept of freedom to do as thou wilt, like Aleister Crowley popularized in our time. It is a liberty from law, from God's law, It is rebellion. Ishtar also went by different names over time and cultures. Astarte, Aphrodite, Inanna, Isis, Ninana, Queen of Heaven, which the Bible specifically references, Heavenly Lady, Astaroth, which the Bible also references too. Over time, Ishtar was also associated with Libertas, a Roman god, as a goddess of war. And this is why she is often used as a symbol of victory and freedom, because to have freedom in a war you must have victory. It's a harlot, victory, and freedom. Lucifer's version of it, though. The torch in her hand has long been called the Masonic Torch of Enlightenment, or the Flaming Torch of Reason. It is the torch of Lucifer, the light bearer. This is not fanciful application or just my ideas. The designer of the statue was a Mason. The foundations were laid in a Masonic ceremony, and there is even an embedded bronze plaque commemorating the event and clearly stating what I just said. The Statue of Liberty is a Masonic design and symbol referring to Lucifer. The statue of Ishtar is placed on a pedestal tower, a reference to the Tower of Babel, ziggurats in Egyptian architecture by its Masonic designer Richard Hunt. The entire structure is built on top of an 11-point star, hearkening to the star of Isis or Ishtar. That's often seen in Babylonian designs. Notice even on American Walking Liberty coins how she is clearly associated with the phoenix, the torch as the light bearer, and the rising sun, Apollo. This esoteric understanding is widely used in Hollywood as well to refer to the light bearer, Lucifer. The 7 sun rays on the statue's head are a reference to the sun god Apollo, just like we saw earlier. The god of Freemasonry is Lucifer, the Prometheus, the light bearer. Notice that the tablet she is holding is only a generic notion of the concept of law. There are no laws written on there. They want freedom and rebellion from God's laws. So it only records July 4th, 1776, the founding of the Illuminati, representing Lucifer's illumination and teachings as law. This brings up the other cover reference, V for victory. Remember, victory was the female figure often portrayed in the chariot of the gods. It is a double reference, V for victory, but the mythological reference, and also V for peace. Notice anything familiar in this picture? Who do the world leaders really serve? Even at the Vatican you can find pictures referencing the Queen of Heaven, the harlot, the goddess of sex and fertility, and of course the obelisk, Osiris. Peace, victory, Lucifer. We have covered a lot today, and while we can't point to specific predictive programming that points to the specific acts that occurred in Paris, we can see a lot of the symbolism that happened just within the past week of timing, Isis striking, Apollyon, the gods of Egypt, the return of them to the City of Light, the Festival of Light, the Year of Light, 33, 13, pyramids, illumination. There are so many fingerprints around this event that echo of the hidden hand that I suspect we shall see a lot more increase in the days ahead, just like the Isis message said, very soon. And we see a lot of these events and signals coming together now, so we should expect an increase in the intensity, the travail that the Bible talks about, the birth pangs, as the mystery of iniquity gives birth to its Rosemary's baby. They've been working on building this plan for a long time, and it has almost come to completion. We are in a very late hour. Satan's disciples are getting ready for significant changes. They know full well what is about to transpire and who is about to come into this world. Do not live for the God of this world. Do not sit at his table and enjoy what he serves. Christians, believers in Christ, we are ambassadors. We are strangers and pilgrims in a foreign land. This world is not our home. Our affections and cares should be toward eternity, not of this life. Live like heaven's ambassadors, not the world's. Our Lord, Master, and King of Kings is returning one day soon. Occupy till he comes. Maranatha.